to a questionnaire scale that has been developed to be administered among the intended respondents. The validation process should have been completed using a representative sample demonstrating adequate reliability and validity. That is the academic or the theoretical, definition, but it can be changed because it depends on person to person, research to research, and also outcome to outcomes. So in a plain word, what is the validator survey? Oh, by the way, Jennifer, could you please remind me every 5 minutes that I am on track? I
Yeah.
may forget. So the simplest way to define the validator survey is the data authentication and realistic findings, actually what I believe. So every research, we need to do some data collection, but that data should be authentic, like the true data, not the fake one, and accurate as more as possible. And also the findings should be realistic so that we can comment on the findings that, yeah, it has something effective. So keeping on this mind, it is very important. So what are the validated survey components? So the first one is the survey sample. So we need to have some actual number of sample, or at least very close to that, because sometimes if your sample is so low, you will not get authentic results, or you cannot generalize your findings. Then the questionnaire or the scale that you're going to administer, then the data collection process, data cleaning, data analysis, reliability, and validity. I'm going to elaborate more on these issues in the next slides. So, okay. So what is the survey sample? So I have put some bullet points very briefly, because all these topics are vast, and if somebody wants to study, they can study a lot. So in short, survey sample actually based on the research question. What is the question you are going to investigate? Based on that, your sample will be decided. For example, if you are collecting information from HIV/AIDS data, then your sample should be a person living in HIV/AIDS or something. So you cannot go to the population and select some samples that doesn't have HIV/AIDS, so we will not get any realistic results. So sample is a very important thing. Then the sample characteristics, which is the demographics, behavior, attitude, practice, ethnicity, religion, etc. Like what are the characteristics of the sample for your research question? Like if you want to collect your research is on child health or maternal health, then your demographic and the behavior aspects, attitude, and the practice, ethnicity will be depend on that. And please feel free to ask me question. You can ask anytime or at the end, that's fine. And for the sample size, if we want to develop a scale, like a measurement scale, it is expected that your sample should be at least 100, number of 100, because usually the scale development or the measurement scale development, we do the factor analysis, which is EFA, exploratory factor analysis, sometimes CFA. So all the research books, they have decided that, okay, at least 100 samples should be collected for this type of analysis. Otherwise, you'll not get a very good result. And the more is better. Then the questionnaire, I slashed it or scale because it depends if you want to evaluate only the question or the scale. The first thing is to identify the variables. Again, it also depends on the research questions, like what type of question you are asking and what type of variables you are going to collect. And always remember that variables that are collected should be analyzed. So you may not want to collect any variable that is useless or may seem to be useless. For example, like you are collecting information from a person about the reproductive health. So you may not ask him or her about his or her political affiliation, what is his thought of the politics, because that data may not be useful in connection with your research question. So if you collect this data, that is redundancy and waste of time, waste of money, because collecting data and developing a question, it takes time. So we should be very cautious about selecting our variables. Then use existing pre-validated questions or develop new questions. Why is it? Usually when we ask a question, we can anytime, anybody can develop a question or asking something, but it is always good to ask a question or include a question which is already validated or used in previous surveys, like census survey or demographic or health data survey or some other pre-established studies that has been proven. So it is better to get them from there. Like if you are asking somebody's age, so go for the question that is already there, which has been validated and asked a lot, and use that question. So better not developing a new one. If you don't have any new, any question that you need, then you can develop it. But again, you have to be cautious about the validation of this question, whether it is collecting the same, um, the what do you call the outcome. Just give an example. If we ask somebody, what is your income? So this is misleading and confusing. Somebody may think about that, okay, you are asking me about my annual income. Somebody may think that, okay, you are asking about my monthly or weekly, something like that. So you should be, or we should be, accurate and just direct, like what type of question we're asking, like what is your annual income? Then it is clear for everybody. Otherwise, the data you will be collecting, that could be diversified, and you will have problem in you would have problem in um, analyzing those data and understanding it. So validated question is important, and good to include cross-checking questions. What is that? Cross-checking questions means when you ask something, the result, the outcome, or the findings we get, we can sometimes use some other questions to validate that. For example, like we are asking, what is your age? And maybe a person is saying that, all right, my age is 40. So we don't know whether it is right or wrong. So we may add another question, something like that, like, okay, where did you born? Or can you remember something, main event or very important event in the year you was born? So you can validate, cross validate your variables, which is important to you, by other questions. So that is the cross checking questions. Answer choices, we usually use, like, dichotomous, Likert, type scale, continuous, multiple responses, etc. And I'm again telling, these are the very basic, and I think everybody knows all of this. Just I'm just making it as a just recall. And then cross match between question that I told you, discussed earlier, like cross checking question and cross match between question. Like when we develop a questionnaire, then it is in our mind that what type of analysis we are going to do and what we want to see from this analysis. So if we include any question and there are several other questions, so we always keep in mind that, okay, this question should be related to the other questions, like if we want to see any correlation or any connection between the questions. So this is like cross match between the questions. Like it will help us in future while analyzing, like if you want to see some connection between two variables, so this cross match question will be helping us. And as I mentioned earlier, avoid unnecessary questions, like remember that all variables should be analyzed. And also be succinct about the length of the question. Nowadays, people are very busy. They don't want to answer like 100 questions. So it is always best practice to make it short, so that people are not bothered or boring them. It is not making you boring, and they can answer very enthusiastically. So length is another thing. Like many people, if they see that a long questionnaire, from the beginning, they are reluctant to answer those questions. And there is a tendency of people while answering questions to skip it. So if you have long questionnaire, then the skipping pattern will be more, like people will try to skip the question. And if from different language, forward translation and back translation, what does it mean? Sometimes we use some scale that is developed in other countries or other language. So if we want to include those, then we have to translate it into English, then it back translate to that language again, and then cross match those two, and then come up with the final one. So it is another point that we can discuss later on if somebody want to know more. Is there any question so far?
Dr.
So
Long,
now
you're
the
about
part is
halfway
data
through.
collection. I'm sorry?
You're about halfway through on time, just as a reminder.
Okay. Thank you. So, so 5 minutes are gone, right? Yeah. Okay.
Slightly over, yes.
So the data collection. Okay. So the data collection procedure. What is the data collection procedure? You know that, like, we conduct survey one-to-one or online. And nowadays we use the digital format platform like RedCap, SurveyMonkey, etc., and the paper and the postal. So we need to modify our question accordingly, which strategy we are going to administer. If we are administering online, then the structure of the question will be different. And if we conduct a paper survey, like sending it to people, so it will be some sorts of different thing, because in paper survey you have freedom to write or put more alternative options, like if you made mistake you can change it or whatever it is. Then recheck, review questionnaire, data collection with the colleagues. Once you develop the questionnaire, definitely go for help, seek help from other colleagues, give it to them and see what is their understanding on that, and then modify it accordingly. And once you develop the questionnaire, we always pilot test it with the similar demographic or characteristics of internal sample. If we are administering a question among the pregnant women, so what do? We usually do a pilot testing among like some other pregnant women who are not the sample, our main sample. So the pilot testing will allow us, if the questionnaire is good, if they can understand it correctly, and the data will be collected accordingly. And based on the pilot testing, we can modify our question accordingly for the final one. And then during the data collection, always monitor the data collection procedure. That I always do when I administer a question every week or 7 days or 5 days or some specific days. I check what is the pattern of the data, if it is collected correctly or if it is not. There is an example, I don't know whether I will get chance for that. I was in my country, then I asked a question to the school kids, like, can you tell, write the 2 lines of the national anthem. And the practice in our country is that every school, when it starts, people and students, they sing the national anthem every day. So I found suddenly after 7 days that 90% say they don't know. So it hit me that there's something wrong is there, because they should know that. Then I went to the field and check it, and then it was fixed. Otherwise, if I did not check it, at the end I was found that like 100%, 90% people, they don't know what is national anthem is, which is not good. So this is a good point. Then the data cleaning, this is very important, because when you get the raw data, it might not be accurate, or there might be a lot of caveats or the missing values or misinformation there. So cleaning data is always good. It is a very vast thing. There are a lot of techniques, different techniques. So the best technique is to see every data, every single variable, and run a frequency, and then check it accordingly, and use it as SPSS or Excel or SAS, any other software that you are used to, and find it how to control it or solve it. So, and then the data analysis thing, and data analysis depends on the survey questionnaire and the objective you're going to do. Now comes to the point, the reliability and the validity. What is the reliability of a survey, especially when you're developing scale? So the reliability is how reliable a question or the scale is. So there are different types of reliability. One is test retest, like the same test or the questionnaire scale over time using the same sample. So you will know that, okay, if your scale is good or bad, or it is understandable. Another one is iterator, like the same test but different sample, like different population. We measure it through the kappa coefficient or the Pearson R. This gives us some statistical understanding whether the scale is okay. Then another one is parallel forms. There is different version of test, like one could be the larger version, one could be the smaller version of the test to be equivalent. And apply it with the same sample or the different sample. And to know the scale is okay, it is collecting the, it is reliable. One option is the internal consistency with the individual items of test, which is done by the Cronbach alpha or the McDonald's omega. Nowadays, McDonald's omega is more robust than the Cronbach alpha, and the mathematics or the theory behind this is, I mean, long, so I don't want to discuss it here, maybe later on. Then we come with the validity. What is the content? There are like different types of validity, like the content validity, construct validity, which is also two parts, like the convergent validity and the discriminant validity, then the concurrent validity and the predictive validity. I'll discuss it in my next slides. So this is, can you see the chart? So this is the chart I adopted from a reference. You see the reference in the bottom. So they guided through how a scale or the survey validation will be done, like identify the construct of interest, then validate the questionnaire, and there's an arrow. And if I want to go through it, I think I will not able to complete my timeline. So if you can go through that, I gave the reference, and if you have question later on, please ask me. I will try my best to answer.
Dr. Alam, you have about 5 minutes remaining.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to give you an example of a measurement scale development. This is the scale that I developed in my PhD on smoking cessation. This is a scale to measure water pipe nicotine dependence among young adults. And this is the first ever scale in the world that I developed so far. So there is no other scale for the young people who smoke water pipe. So what I did through this, and you will get some idea how the validated scale comes. So why this survey or the project was done? And because there was no validated scale for the water pipe smokers among young smokers. There are some other scales for the nicotine dependence, mostly cigarette smoking, and those are not appropriate for the water pipe smoking because every product is different and the nicotine dependence based on the characteristics of that product. So there was a need to develop a scale for that. And for this one, we went through a longer process. What? First, we selected a group of nicotine dependent experts. It was the survey was conducted in Syria. So then they reviewed existing nicotine dependent literature and they came up with a lot of items to know about the dependence. And then they administered this questionnaire with the ongoing experiences of dependence. And they came up with 200 items, which is huge for the dependent measures. And then they checked for clarity and non-redundancy. As I told you earlier, the inter-rater reliability, couple of them sat together, evaluated it, saw the kappa coefficient and the Pearson R and all other things. And finally, they could reduce it to 28 items. And then they tested the 28 items into 2 different additional samples, which is retest reliability that I explained earlier. And finally, they came up with 28 items and it administered among 498 young Lebanese water pipe smokers in a cohort study. So, then we evaluated it. And I did that with the psychometric procedure. Psychometric procedure actually is the procedure using the psychometric analysis, considering the psychological aspects, like the different types of constructs and the psychological aspects of the nicotine dependence. So what I did, I conducted 2 types of analysis. One is EFA, exploratory factor analysis, to reduce the number of the item, and then the confirmatory factor analysis to see if the factor structure is okay. So the EFA gave me 13 item instrument from the 28 items that had very good Cronbach alpha and the McDonald's omega, which is very large, and confirmed me that the scale is reliable. Then I conducted a CFA to confirm the factor structure, and it verified through the model fit. And the validity, as I mentioned earlier, that the ability to question that truly measure what it purpose to capture. Like what do you want to capture? The validity will give you that. So content validity, these are the empirical evidence. Just reading the question, you'll know that, well, this is a valid question. The conversion validity is that if this scale is very much correlated, like the R value R is more than 0.50, between compared to another similar scale. For example, my scale was SCTS 13 and it showed like more than 0.50 R with a similar scale like the LWDS 10J, which measured another dependence or the Hong, that is the cigarette measurement scale. So the correlation was a little bit higher than 5.0. So it says the convergent validity, okay. Discriminant validity. So your scale is measuring nicotine dependency and there is a scale for the depression. So your scale should not measure the depression. So if you correlate these two scale, it should not be highly correlated. I would say it will be less than 0.50. So it will ensure that yes, your scale is measuring the nicotine dependence, not the depression. So it is called the discriminant validity, which is very important for a scale development. Then the concurrent validity, what is that? That should have some ability to predict concurrently the outcome. And the predictive validity, by its name, we know that we can predict the outcome in future. So I tested all these things in my scale with the sample in a cohort, as I told, the cohort study. So developed a scale in the first cohort and it applied in consecutive cohort 2, 3, and 4 for the predictive validity, and which was the result was very good. You can find the findings. The Kronberg alpha was 0.87, which is very good. It was a very good factor structure for the CFA, and the convergent validity was like 0.75 and 0.858, which is good. Discriminant was less than 0.50. Concurrent validity, it could predict the smoking pattern or the indicator is good. And the predictive validity was also good. It could predict the smoking pattern and the indicators. So I think I'm very close to that. And there is a summary. This the validity result, the validity scale or the survey validation. So identify appropriate and accurate items of question that I discussed earlier. Select the accurate response choice, like if you are using Likert scale or dichotomous or continuous, it will depend on your research question and the variable you're using. Cross-match the items so that your items are okay. That highest efforts on data collection, like follow all the procedures that you can get a good quality data. And check for the reliability, check for the validity, and also always administer in another sample. If it gives you a good result, then your scale is good. And here are the recommended studies. The first one that is used for, if you read it, you can have some idea how a validated scale is developed to measure opioid use. Second one is my paper. It was published in drug and alcohol dependence, and you can have some idea how I developed this scale. The third one is like, some reference for the Fagerstrom nicotine test for dependence, which is widely used to measure nicotine dependence. Another one is also a very widely used nicotine dependence scale, the Piper, Megan Piper. She is a very renowned person in tobacco research. The brunette, that is depressive symptoms, that the DSS that I used here in my study. It will also give you some idea how you can develop a scale, what are the procedure. Then I mentioned one book, that is the Tamaknik and Fidel book. It will give you the whole explanation, every concept and the terms I used here, like the validity, reliability, what is the cross match, and what is the question, everything. Like you can have a very good idea from this book, like the jargon terms. And then the final one, this is a guide to how you can develop a validated survey or a scale. And I think this is the end of my presentation, and